Welcome back to NewsMakers as we look ahead to the brave new era bearing down on primary schools. On the panel, Lianne, Dalziel, Nicky, Wagner and Denise, Torrey. Do you want to respond to Lianne's comments?
Yeah, I think so. I think there is quite a lot of misunderstanding about national standards and national tests. And a lot of the comments we've had is that national testing doesn't work. And some countries actually have a test on a day for all their pupils. National standards, as the way they're going to be introduced in New Zealand, is quite unique, and there is not just one test. It is the testing that schools are already doing. So they might be using something like a PAT test, they might be using a STAR test, they might be using any number of tests that they can use. So from those tests, plus all the other assessments that goes into their school, they will come up with what they think that each pupil is doing. So it's not to a test at all. And I think when you see that, you can understand that it's a much richer experience than it would be just to a test.
Do you accept, to some degree, you are stifling creativity and dynamic teaching in the classroom?
Well, I was a teacher myself and I taught English in particular, and I found, particularly with young people who found reading and grammar and things like that difficult, the more creative you had to be to teach them. And so you actually dug deeper and did more unusual things with them for that very reason. And I actually think introducing the new curriculum and national standards together is an opportunity to make sure that that richness is available.
All right, Denise.
Part of the problem, I think, is because there is this fear about league tables, it makes it very high stakes about what teachers are going to focus on. And the recent research that came out of Cambridge last week talked about a broad curriculum actually raised achievement. Now, New Zealand has the most sophisticated, new, modern, future-focused curriculum in the world. And we don't want it to be so narrow and so focused. We're not saying that there's a test, we're saying that teachers will still just focus on those things.
Right.
And to the detriment of some of the other really rich experiences that children need to have at school. Our president said some of our children go to school for those rich experiences because they don't have them at home. So if research is showing us that a broad education raises achievement in numeracy and literacy, that's what we need to do. And if we make a national standards the very focus of what every teacher does, they're going to teach to the national standards.
OK, I want to come to the league tables debate in a moment. Can I just throw one other question at you, Denise, based on what you said? I've heard it claimed from the government that when it comes to low decile schools, for example, kids from disadvantaged backgrounds, with this national standards regime, will it allow students to do better by having clear expectations of what they can achieve? You know, are we too excusing, too accepting of, oh, well, they will never be able to be fully literate? You know what I mean?
I believe national standards are expectations. I do believe that. But both Nicky and Lianne have pointed out that what's important is the value added. Some of those children are never going to get to the national standard. Never. They don't come in with enough experiences, and we don't necessarily have enough resources to get them to the national standard. Yeah. But if we can show the value added, and it's great to hear the ministers looking at that, then you'll be able to show children's progress over time, and that's really important.
Just for the sake of those who aren't acquainted with some of the lingo, what is value added? What do we mean?
If a child comes in, here's the benchmark when they, after first year at school, and they come into school here, and their experiences or skills are way down here. It takes them a long time to get to here, as opposed to the child arrived at school with a good set of experience and skills. They don't have so far to go. So it's the distance between when they enter and where they take that measurement.
Some children come in ready for school. They can count and they know some numbers and they've had a rich experience of conversations, and therefore they're ready to learn, whereas some kids come without that, and it takes them a lot longer to get there.
That's why the decile rating is in place. It's actually to enable a school to be able to meet some of the differences. So, for example, a low decile school has access to books and homes as a program. For some of those children, they're the first books that they've ever been able to take home and keep. Now, we all know that if you look at the number of books in a person's home, that's going to say a lot about their achievement levels long term. Another thing too is that the national standards, we're talking about expectations. Can I say that a much greater predictor of how well a child is going to do is how well the teacher thinks the child's going to do and how well the parents think the child's going to do. And actually some of those homeschool programs are actually much more important to getting achievement up. And sometimes you've got to look at children learning in a different way. Some kids learn their literacy and numeracy skills in totally different subjects than English and maths.
But if I was a parent of a struggling student, let's suppose young Lianne was not meeting the national standard. I get the report, I've got the plain English reporting.
I was lucky.
Oh, well, I know, top of the class, teacher's pet. But let's suppose you weren't. I get the plain English reporting saying Lianne is not meeting the standard. I'm informed, I'm aware. Maybe I wasn't.
My parents always
prior.
got plain English reports. They said, Lianne's done well in her exams, but she behaves very badly. So, I mean, and that was a constant refrain when I got to secondary school. Actually, I was much better at primary. But the point is that parents are able to get that information now. They go to parent-teacher meetings, they can sit down and engage directly with their teachers. There are some parents that find it difficult to even engage with the teachers themselves, because they're not on that level.
Okay.
The greatest predictor of educational achievement for a young person is their mother's educational qualifications.
All right, quick comments to that, Denise?
It comes back to the groundswell comment that you made at the beginning. I'm not sure where the groundswell is, because we've had benchmarks in schools for quite a long time, and we have been telling parents where their children are at against those benchmarks.
Do they understand those?
Not always, and that requires a lot of extra work on behalf of the school to actually explain those. And yes, we've got work to do there. We recognise we've got work to do there. But by just focusing on one standard, it doesn't mean that we're going to have those rich conversations about all the other things that happen in a child's educational life.
All right. Your right of reply, Nicky?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think a lot of schools have been doing this very well, and for them, national standards will be business as usual. But in the last reports that we got from Aero in 2007 and 2008, nearly half the schools weren't. And in comment about parents, I think if we can get parents more involved with their schools, and hopefully this reporting will help that, it can take some of the pressure off schools to do everything, because we know that that partnership is important.
Before we go to the break, league tables. In April, the Education Minister famously said that the best disinfectant is fresh air. Yet last month, Anne Tolley caved in to sector pressure and is now planning to make it as difficult as possible for the media to produce league tables. Why has she buckled?
Well, the Ombudsman has said it's important that people can see what's going on in schools, but also we understand that the teachers are concerned about league tables. We don't think league tables can add any value, and we think it's important that families feel good about what their kids are doing.
What is so wrong with the concept of this information being freely and intelligibly available to everyone?
Well, it is. I mean, as soon as we table an achievement document to a Board of Trustees, it becomes a public document, and parents in that community can have access to that information to have dialogue with their school about their children in their communities.
But when it comes to the inter-school comparisons, why is that so bad news brown?
Because then those rich conversations are going to close down. Then we get into that blame culture. And that doesn't do anything for education, because we're getting blamed for things instead of working with schools to improve teaching and learning within that school.
Quick comment.
I would have no problem if it was actually measuring the value add. If we measured the progress that children were making at school, then I don't think anyone would be fearful of that. The trouble is league tables don't measure progress, they measure a point in time and compare everyone as if they all started on the same level, and we all know they don't.
All right. We'll take a break. Coming up, we'll have a quick look at the national curriculum and disruptive students. What should we do with them? Do stay with us.